Cheese, house in Baltimore, and my fill of cheese next weekend. But at least for the downtime here, a nice time to sit back, put my feet up, watch a little Red Zone, and talk to some old friends about some non-football related materials, and certainly the Orioles winter of discontent coming. This guy spent many Orioles winters of discontent as the beat writer for the Washington Post of the Orioles. He is now a longtime staff writer at the Washington Post and covering all of baseball, including a pretty interesting World Series the last couple of weeks. He's been getting his passport stamp between Texas and California, back and forth. You can follow him at Dave Sheinin out on Twitter, as well as at the Washington Post. And if you see a guy walking around Canton or Fells Point that looks like Dave Sheinin near Patterson Park, it is him, because he lives in Baltimore. What's going on, Dave? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Decompressing after a long postseason and a tremendous World Series.
You know, I thought it was a good season. I think I began all of my windy baseball chats with people like you by saying, it's a pretty good year for baseball. I mean, not every year stands out in that way, but I thought it kind of had a lot to offer, and I think the young players and different teams, and the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers playing chase right now of the Astros, I found it to be kind of satiating, to be honest. It was a good baseball year, especially a year when the Orioles were never really a huge factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Major League Baseball and you wind up with, the Yankees going deep in the postseason, the Red Sox making it, the Dodgers going to the World Series, the Chicago Cubs going, to the NLCS, the Nationals making it, even Houston, which is not necessarily considered a great baseball market, but it's a big market, demographics-wise, just population-size. I think, baseball would take this any day. I think you're right about the plethora of young stars. Aaron Judge emerging in New York is one of the biggest stories of the year. And really, I mean, I think the way the game has changed this year, the number one story in baseball from 2017, when we look back on it 20 years from now, is going to be the way the game changed in 1 year, with the home runs going through the roof, strikeouts going up, just the change in the way the game is played.
Well, and then there's the aftermath of all the managerial comings and goings, beginning with Dusty Baker and through Farrell and obviously Joe Girardi. I mean, it's like winning caught a cold in the postseason when you couldn't win. That just speaks to sort of the madness of the expectations, I think, around all of these franchises. Let's start with Dusty Baker in D.C. I know you're closer to that as the Washington Post writer. I just find that to be bizarre, and as much as you saw really, really piss-poor ownership here, and we've seen it for a quarter of a century in Baltimore. I don't know that what's going on in Washington can be deemed as anything that feels stable to me, especially given the backside of Bud Black and the other things that have gone on down there. It feels sticky in D.C. for the learners.
Yeah, it was very strange. It's sort of, a lot of people thought he was going to be brought back. It was just a matter of when and how much money. I think this caught a lot of people by surprise, including Dusty and possibly even Mike Rizzo, who was on the record a couple of weeks before the end of the season saying, we're going to get a deal done with Dusty. The ownership in Washington, much like in Baltimore, has been pretty silent in recent years, so that we don't have a lot of insight into their thinking. But I'll tell you this, Nestor, I find it very interesting that in the span of a couple of weeks, the Yankees, Red Sox, Phillies, Mets, and Nationals all fired managers who were, with the exception of Farrell and Girardi, on the older side, Terry Collins, older, and you saw them all get younger by 15 to 20 years. And I think in the case of Girardi, they haven't hired his successor yet, but you're probably going to see another much younger manager. And obviously, teams are not going to say that we wanted to get younger because there's age discrimination factors at play there. But I think what you're seeing is the result of managers like Dave Roberts and A.J. Hinch, and to a lesser extent, like Torey Lovullo in Arizona, who had a great year. I think you're seeing a lot of teams seeing that as the way to go now with managers, to get a young guy who's able, who will convey the messages from the front office and can connect with players, And I think that might be something that's going on here with all these managerial moves.
Well, I think there's a lot of guys in their 50s whose eyeballs roll back when you start talking analytics and the nerds come out of the closet. And baseball, I mean, as much as we say our society has a left-right problem and a Trump-not-Trump problem, baseball's got an analytics versus non-analytics problem, right? It's got an old school, new school side of it, and the Orioles haven't had that problem because the old man doesn't know what analytics are, and Buck and Dan probably aren't long for being around here. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes, but in other places, that really is sort of a chasm where you're like, well, we're trying to manage at one point at 50,000 feet, and you're down there in the weeds doing something completely differently than what we want you to do. And I guess I was awakened to that with Moneyball, right? I mean, the whole Billy Bean concept was I'm sort of the manager of the team, but I do it from the treadmill back here while I watch the games on television, right?
That's exactly right, and I think this postseason pushed it to an entirely new dimension. And I mean, you had the team with the largest analytics department in baseball, the Dodgers, against the team with probably the most aggressive analytics department. In other words, the ones that rely on it the most heavily and in the most aggressive way, and that permeates the entire organization, and that's the Astros. So I think that's going to be the takeaway from this World Series when we look back on it from a distance. This was the year I think that the analytics won out once and for all. I mean, you still have holdouts like Washington and Baltimore that are more scout based, and to their credit, I mean, those teams do have analytics departments. They're just not running the show. I think this was the year that analytics won that debate of analytics versus scouting. I mean, in addition to the two World Series teams, the Yankees in the LCS and the Cubs, who lost in the LCS, those are two of the more analytical teams in baseball as well. So this genie is not going back in the bottle.
Well, one thing is not going back in the bottle either. I don't think of the strikeouts and the home runs, and I know you were amongst many talking to players about the juiced balls in the World Series and the different covers on the balls and the inconsistencies and all that. But clearly the home run's nice and all that, but the strikeout part of this, and maybe part of it's watching the beer league Orioles play 160 games a year, that I get that feeling about it. But much like when I watch the NFL, and I know you covered the NFL for a number of years, when the product's not good, when the games aren't good, when the action isn't brisk and interesting and entertaining, it's not good. And for baseball, that would be my one complaint. The storylines all worked out, and there are stars, but the games themselves and the pace of play and the amount of 98-mile-an-hour fastballs that get swung upon and missed, or connect to, for a home run, a solo home run, because nobody walks either. There's all that going on, and I don't find that to be a great brand of baseball, but it's clearly heading in that direction, Dave.
It is, and again, that's another genie that's not going back in the bottle. I mean, there are people who will tell you that the game right now has never been better, that high home runs and high strikeout totals are great for baseball. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I think that everybody wants to go and see Max Scherzer have a shot at 20 strikeouts in a game, but when it's your team striking out 20 times and hitting 4 home runs, and that's the entire offense, that's not a lot of fun. I think that everything, you could trace almost everything that's bad in baseball right now to velocity. And the fact that, to even get a look as a major league pitcher, you pretty much have to throw 95. And the last 3 or 4 innings of every game is a parade of relievers throwing 98 to 100. And I think that you can trace everything that's wrong in the game to that. You can trace the pace of play to that, because it takes longer to gear up for each one of those pitches, and it takes longer to gear up as a hitter to hit it. You can blame the Tommy John epidemic on it. You can blame the home run, the go-for-it swings, the all-or-nothing swings that produce lots of home runs and strikeouts. I mean, all of this goes back to velocity, but I don't know what you can do about that.
He is Dave Sheinin. You can find him out on Twitter at Dave Sheinin. He's a staff writer for the Washington Post, covering all things Major League Baseball. He's been running around with the World Series. This portion of our programming brought to you by Compass Point Golf Course down in Pasadena. Best place to play this fall and winter. Put on a little fleece, put on a little windbreaker, get out there on Black Friday. They got their turkey shoot coming down the pike. You can learn more at compasspointgolf.com. And, of course, Robert Kennedy is our insider for college basketball representing Compass Point. You'll be be hearing from him here weekly as well. Big shout out to Box Hill Pizzeria. It's more of a crab cakeria up in Abingdon in Harford County. Those crab cakes can now be shipped anywhere in the world for the holidays. Box Hill Pizzeria is the way to do that, but it is a crab cakery. And don't forget, when you're in there, take home that salad dressing. You'll be happy you did. Dave Sheinin can be found wandering the streets of Baltimore and in the pages of the Washington Post, as well as Dave Sheinin on Twitter. And, you know, the exhale of you running around with the Astros and the Dodgers and the Yankees and all this postseason beautiful game of baseball is, well, then there's the Orioles offseason, which began with, is Buck Showalter going to the Phillies? I think we all sort of poo-pooed that, at least for this year. And then there is the, well, we want to bring back Tillman and Wade Miley at this point. And then there's what's really going to transpire here over the next 90 days of hot stove baseball, Dave, and how the Orioles are going to reposition themselves, not just for 2018, but for the foreseeable future with the problems they have right now. Machado, Brock, Britton, Jones at the end, as well as Duquette and Buck Showalter. Boy, they got a lot of answers that they're going to have to answer to, and they've never been good at this thing. Peter has never been good at this.
Yeah. You know, they do have, they're in a tough spot here. You know, they're sort of having to go forward this winter on two separate tracks. One is this short-term goal of contending in 2018 with a team that, you know, like you said, the championship window is closing. The Machado, Britton, Adam Jones free agency looms at the end of 2018. You really you owe it to the fans and to those players to make one more good run at it. And I think at the trade deadline, by holding on to the pieces they did, they signaled their intention to do that. But that's fine. But you know, to build a winner, they have to grow homegrown pitchers, and they have to do it, you know, in numbers. It can't just be one or two guys, because the law of attrition in baseball says that, you know, a couple of pitchers out of five are going to be sidelined with arm injuries. So you have to build this in bulk, and they're really not close right now. And so those two goals are sort of at cross purposes, because to contend in 2018, it's going to require resources either in money or in players, in prospects that you don't want to spend because you're trying to hold on to that for the future. So it's a real tough spot for this franchise, and I'm very curious to see. I mean, where do you even go to get better in a starting rotation this winter? I mean, are you going to throw money at Yu Darvish, or, you know, I just don't see it.
I don't think Jake Arrieta is coming back.
Right. So what do you do if you're the Orioles and you're trying to contend in 2018, and you see the Yankees and the Red Sox taking these steps forward? I mean, to me, I don't even know how feasible it is to even try.
Well, and then you say, all right, so what would another team do? I mean, the Tigers folded up Verlander, and, you know, we'll find out how those three players play out. I don't think anybody in Houston really cares at this point, you know, after the parade. But for the Orioles, these are the tough decisions to say, what is the strategy here? What is the plan? And I don't ever feel like there's a real strong plan that, you know, is wildly endorsed by the ownership and seen through the organization. There can't be a plan over the next 12 months, because the guys that are running the place aren't under contract, and quite frankly, I think it's a long shot to think they're going to be under contract a year from now.
Well, that's another part of it, right? I mean, you've got lame duck manager and GM, and you don't know how that's going to shake out. You know, to me, we talked about this back in the summer, you and I. I mean, I felt like the move to make at the trade deadline was to trade off the pieces that you could get, you know, usable pieces for the future back for. You know, trade Zach Britton, trade Brad Brock, trade Machado for that matter, if there's a deal out there that would have made sense for you. You know, to me, it was always a pipe dream to contend at down the stretch in 2017, and they did better than I thought they would. They made a good run into September, but again for 2018, I'm just not sure how this team makes up the ground that they lost to the Yankees and Red Sox in 2017. I just don't see that pathway as currently constructed unless they do something that I can't imagine what it would be to get significantly better.
He is Dave Sheinin. You can find him out at the Washington Post as well as at Dave Sheinin out on Twitter doing the off-season baseball thing. Give me a crystal ball here, Dave. Let's play a little game here. Buck Showalter, manager, general manager, or gone this time next year?
If I had to guess, I would say gone.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he wants to manage anymore after this year or after this coming year. I'm not sure that the GM situation is going to work itself out in the way that he would want here. So I would guess gone, but I would not be surprised if he came back as general manager.
Is he qualified for that job? I've been told by many, many people around baseball that is something stupid that Angelos would do, which is put him into a job that, quite frankly, is a lot different than that job used to be. That job used to be if you were, in that seat, you moved up the chair. That's not a completely different gig these days, being a GM.
To me, I would say he's not qualified for that anymore. He would have been 10 or certainly 20 years ago. But the way the game has changed now, like I said earlier, I mean, this is the direction the game is going. You've got to be at the forefront of analytics today. If not, you're going to be taken advantage by the smart teams. That's the direction I would go if I was the Orioles. But that said, I mean, Buck Showalter is one of the most respected guys in the game, as you know. And who's to say he wouldn't be? There could end up being market inefficiencies if there's too many analytical teams. There could be market inefficiencies in the other direction that only scouts and scout-based franchises see. It may swing all the way in that direction at some point. So who's to say Buck Showalter wouldn't be good at that job? That's just not what teams are looking for right now. Smart teams.
Dan Duquette, here or gone a year from now?
I think gone.
Well, then that means by definition there'd have to be a new GM, right? So let's start with that.
So he's either replaced by Showalter, or they go out and start looking for one of the young Ivy League analytics guys to come in and remake the entire organization.
Is the job still toxic? Can I ask you that? I mean, last time around it was. I mean, the reason Duquette wound up here is because literally no one in the sport, they blackballed Angelos. They just refused to come and work for him.
Well, and then Duquette tried to leave too, remember?
So, right, sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think that winning as they have done over the last 5 years has changed the perception somewhat, but I do think that perception also has to include the reality that championship window is closing. So I don't know that it's the same toxic situation it was back then when Duquette was coming on board, but it still has the same problems of perception that it's always had.
Well, and the bigger problem really would be the Yankees and Red Sox reloading, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, that really is where, and to some degree, the Masson money's starting to burn out a little bit. That money, and really at the heart of all of this, every decision that Angelos ever makes comes with the caveat of they might come and take $200 million from me one day, right? Like that he always walks around with that cloud over top of him, even though publicly it's all bluster and they're never going to get the money and it's my money. I still think, when all is said and done, the Nationals are going to get a big check from Mr. Angelos or his estate or his good-looking sons or, whomever owns the Orioles. At some point, there's going to be some money going from Baltimore down to Washington, right?
Yeah, well, that case is certainly hovering over this franchise until it gets resolved. You have to sort of be open to that possibility that you are going to lose a chunk of money there. So yeah, I have to assume that affects decision making at the very highest level of the organization.
Adam Jones, still an Oriole this time next year or not?
I think so. I mean, I think that he's put down roots here. I'm not saying he's going to take a hometown discount that completely robs him. But I do think that can be worked out, and it might even get worked out in advance, if both sides are willing. I think that Jones would have to, give up center field probably for that to happen. It's just slowing down with age. I think that's probably in the cards for him one way or the other. But I think a deal can be reached there. I think both sides would probably be on board for that. It's just a matter of getting the numbers right.
Dave Sheinin can be found at the Washington Post, as well as at Dave Sheinin. That's Sheinin. He's still unpeeling his suitcase from a month spent on the road chasing baseball around, and the Astro Stadium's still pretty cool. And I know the fans there were a little let down, but we really did get to see some good baseball. And really, I thought the energy level all the way through was kind of cool.
It was. I think that, it was a great story for Houston to win, for all the victims of Hurricane Harvey, for the first time in the franchise history. But there was something special about the Dodgers and being at Dodger Stadium and seeing Vin Scully and Tommy Lasorda and Oral Hershiser and all these guys coming out to throw out first pitches and all the history there. I would have been fine with the story either way. I always root for the story. You know me. People ask me, who do you root for? I root for the story. And both of those would have been incredible stories. Game 7 was itself a letdown, I guess, but the series itself was an all-time classic. There were two of the best games I've ever seen in my life, games 2 and 5. So there was almost no way that this thing could go wrong once it got to Game 7.
All right, man. Well, I will let you sail on, rest up, get ready for Hot Stove. By the way, I wanted to ask someone, what is the background on Hot Stove? Do I need to Google that? Because I always refer to it as Hot Stove, and I'm thinking, how did it get named Hot Stove? Is it like touching a hot stove? Is it like warming up the sea? I don't. Why Hot Stove? Do you know the definition?
I have no idea. I do not.
I'm going to Google
that.
Out,
let me know.
Hot Stove baseball definition. I'm trying to understand that or the background. I'll come up with that. But, it's one of those things like the Baltimore chop or can of corn. I'm just trying to get definitions.
All right. Report back to me what you find.
Enjoy it, Dave. We'll see you soon, man. It'll be spring training in no time. There he goes, Dave Sheinin, one of our favorites. He does live here in Baltimore, but he covers baseball for the Washington Post. You can find him at Dave Sheinin out on Twitter. No one does it better than him, so go find him at WashingtonPost.com as well. You can find me out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Don't forget, our morning newspaper delivers to your email inbox digitally each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's free. It's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST text service during this here bye period before we go off to Green Bay next week. If it happens, you'll get it first on your text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colazzos will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5 as well. That is the SSV on WNST. That's a Sunday Sports Voice, now heard 3 until 5 on Thursday. I am nasty at WNST.net 24 hours a day. I take all email, praise, and criticism equally. Something like that after 26 years of this. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I promise to have more of a sense of humor next year. I'm working really hard on that. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.